Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Cowan-Smith. Tonight, Uganda's Bobi Wine hopes to intoxicate a nation with his message of unity. The pop star turned politician formally announces his candidacy in upcoming elections, but despite his popularity, a lack of concrete policies may still be a hurdle in his plans. Also, Boris Johnson has been chosen as the UK's new Prime Minister. The controversial figure at home has also sparked international outrage, and in Africa in particular, he shocked many with comments widely perceived to be racist and offensive. And fishing is crucial to the livelihoods of tens of thousands of people in Togo, but marine pollution is putting livelihoods at risk. With little support from the state, we meet a group of fishermen who've taken matters into their own hands. But first, Ugandan opposition figure Bobi Wine has officially announced his candidacy in the 2021 elections. The 37-year-old former pop star had become the poster politician for the huge young population who've never known any other leader than 74-year-old Yoweri Museveni. Wine has been arrested several times and faces charges of treason. He only entered politics in 2017, and though critics do point to his lack of experience, he has gained a huge popular following with his message of unity and calls for change.
It is useless for me to think I will give any contribution without you, ladies and gentlemen. So I want to reiterate my call to all of us to always remember that this country is bigger than all of us. It is bigger than any of us. Uganda was there before the coming of colonialism. Uganda was there after colonialism. Uganda was there before dictatorship. And yes, Uganda will be there after dictatorship.
Well, Courtney Harrington joins us now with more from Kampala. Grania, so we heard there from Bobi Wine with some very rousing stuff about his hopes going forward. But it still seems that he's not saying very much about policy.
Well, yes, as always from Bobi Wine, this is what he's very good at. He is a performer. There's a reason that he's a star and he gathers so many crowds. So a very strong speech today accusing President Museveni of corruption, of cronyism, of beating up opposition contenders. But as you say, there is very little policy content to speak of yet. And this is where his critics have always accused him of lacking experience. And this is what's always let him down. For instance, in a media interview not that long ago, he was asked about his fiscal policy, and he really struggled to answer that. So policy is what people are really waiting for. But what he did unveil today was what he calls a revolutionary movement of mobilizers that he says are going to go all around the country to where President Museveni traditionally has his base. That's out in the country, out in the villages, and he's going to build a base there in the run-up to the beginning of the campaign in a year's time. But as for policy, we're really waiting to see what people power policy really is.
And the election's a bit more than a year away. Can Bobi Wine, in that time, despite his shortcomings, unite the opposition?
So, yeah, we have now quite a fragmented opposition, although the nominations aren't in yet, so it's not official. The full list of runners and riders isn't in yet, but we will maybe have the perennial candidate, who is Kizza Besigye, who's Museveni's former personal physician, who knows him really well, who's been a four-time election contender, a four-time loser, and who's very, very popular. And then we have another new contender with the Democratic Party, which is an old and very well-respected party, but which historically doesn't do that well in elections, has suddenly got a new member, which is one of Uganda's most popular singers, Jose Chameleon, who recently joined in the past few weeks. So he was a former supporter of Museveni's, and he's potentially seen as something of a spoiler, which may split the opposition even more in the run-up to the 2021 election. And while Bobi Wine's movement say that they're open to talking to anybody, to working with anybody, Bobi Wine is their candidate. So it remains to be seen how the opposition will or can unite.
And what about these charges that he's facing? Will that get in the way?
Yes, there have been various charges against him. I mean, the strongest one is one of treason, which was taken against him during a by-election last year when he and his supporters were accused of throwing stones at President Museveni's car, and then subsequently were said to have, they were accused of having arms in their hotel room. Now, that was said to have been planted and fabricated. Bobi Wine says this was fabricated by the Ugandan police to get him out of this race. And so that treason charge still stands against him. And if he is convicted of any offence between now and 2021, that will rule him out definitively of running for election.
Thanks very much. Courtney Harrington there for us in Kampala. Now, Kenya's finance minister was replaced on Wednesday after being charged with fraud in connection to a multi-million-dollar contract for the building of 2 dams. Henry Rotich, who'd occupied the post since 2013, was sacked after having been released on bail a day earlier. It's a rare move against a sitting minister in a country that's plagued by widespread institutional corruption. Well, despite the cordial statements from some African leaders congratulating Britain's new Prime Minister, Boris Johnson is not taking over from Theresa May with the best of reputations on the continent. Before being handed the top job in the UK, Johnson was notorious for comments that were widely perceived to be racist and offensive.
Boris Johnson is never shy of the colourful phrase. Known for his outspoken style, he's faced repeated accusations of racism, particularly in Africa, where some of his comments have sparked outrage. In 2002, Boris Johnson, who was then a member of the British Parliament, penned an article in The Spectator titled "Africa is a mess, but we can't blame colonialism." In the piece, he described the continent as a blot, suggesting it would be better off if it was colonised again, writing that the problem in Africa is not that we were once in charge, but that we are not in charge anymore. Johnson had already come under fire for describing black children as pickaninnies with watermelon smiles in a column he wrote for the Daily Telegraph. He later defended his comments as wholly satirical. A decade later, in 2016, Johnson criticised a decision by then US President Barack Obama to remove a bust of Winston Churchill from the Oval Office, saying Obama had an ancestral dislike of the British Empire because of his part Kenyan heritage. Africa is unlikely to be a top priority for Boris Johnson. However, given the controversial nature of his past comments, African leaders will be watching closely as he develops his future policies towards the continent.
Well, fishing is crucial to the livelihoods of thousands of people in Togo, but marine pollution is putting those livelihoods at risk. With little support from the state in tackling the waste piling up in harbours, one group of fishermen have taken matters into their own hands. Our correspondents report.
After lying for several hours at depths of more than 500 metres, these fishing nets are finally hauled up, pulled overboard by sheer manpower. Fishermen along 50 kilometres of the Togolese coastline have used the same technique for decades. What's changed is the amount of plastic waste that's now being dragged up along with the anchovies and sardines.
Every day we find rubbish in our nets, and what you can see here, that's nothing. Sometimes it's a lot worse. It looks like a rubbish dump.
Littering alone isn't to blame. The daily activities of the fishing port are also responsible for polluting Togo's ocean. Modest Awoku, a local fisherman, is doing what he can to combat the contamination of the waters he works in. He's rallied a few of his colleagues to clean up the marinas of the capital's biggest fishing harbour at least twice a month.
We decided that we can't continue to work in a dirty environment. We continuously see fishermen pouring out the rubbish from the front of their fishing boats into the sea. When we catch them doing it, we ask them to clean it up.
Driving home the importance of looking after the environment is a never-ending battle. No sooner has a clean-up ended than rubbish reappears, as this footage, filmed just days later, shows.
It's unbelievable. When the area is filthy and you have to eat next to it, you know the health risks.
The brigade reported the situation to the management of Lomé Port and have also asked the National Public Sanitation Agency to come and clean up the area. They've had no response.
People are living in filth and rubbish, but we don't have a choice. This is where we come to get our supplies. The government sees it, everyone can see that it's dirty, but no one says anything.
A new modern fishing port has been built in Lomé, but though it was inaugurated 3 months ago, it still hasn't officially opened for business. With their harbours and shores overflowing with waste, fishing villages up and down the coast continue to struggle with the economic, environmental and social cost of marine pollution.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care.